deserves it. All of you! It doesn't matter how obscure you are. You're all getting a movie. You want a little sneak peek?
Coming this summer, from the shadows of Batman,
It's happening?
emerges a hero.
They're finally going to make a movie about me!
Alfred, the movie. The ultimate grime fighter. When the dust settles, only one man will be left dusting. Coming broom.
Don't worry, bruh. If Alfred got a movie, you must be next.
Right. My movie must be slated for next summer.
Coming next summer. A new hero will light up the night.
Please be me, please be me, please be me, please be me!
It's the car.
Oh, they did the car before you, bro.
This is ridiculous!
Batmobile, the movie. Coming vroom.
That actually does look pretty good.
I
do love the Batman's automobile.
They must be saving the best for last then. I'm sure my movie is next summer.
Coming next summer. The story of Batman's greatest ally
That's me! That must be me!
and best friend in the whole wide world.
Finally! Thank you for making a movie about...
Utility Belt.
What?
The movie. You put things in it.
He thought the movie was about him!
He's just a sidekick. He's a nobody.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. I'm your host, Perry Constantine, and welcoming back a returning guest, and that is Scott Honig. Scott, how you doing today?
I am great, Perry. Thank you so much for having me back. This is always a blast.
Yes, always a blast on my end, too. Always happy to have you on. So let's just do a quick recap, remind people who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I am by trade a high school English teacher, and I have been teaching comics in pretty much every class they'll let me teach comics in for the last, 15 years or so. They've even allowed me to teach specific classes on comics at both the high school and middle school level. I got my doctorate in 2018, and my dissertation was on the use of comics and graphic novels in the ELA classroom. So this is my jam. I love teaching it. I love reading it. I love watching it. I love talking about it. So I think that's why I'm here.
Yep, we love having you all on every time to talk about this stuff. So what are you guys reading in your classes lately? Anything interesting?
So because we just switched over from the first half of the year to the second half of the year, my middle school graphic novel class ended. I just started my high school one, and I try to start them off a little bit slowly. So we start with slice of life comics. So I introduced them to creators like Adrian Tomine and Harvey Pekar. You know, these guys who have been doing these small stories, often short stories that are sort of more observational and conversational rather than the big action stuff. And that allows us to get into ways of analyzing comics, matching form to content and things like that before we get to the big, long form graphic novels.
Do you do manga in your classes at all?
So the only manga that I've introduced has been Death Note.
Okay.
I'm not a huge manga fan myself, and I'm woefully undereducated in Eastern comics, so I tend not to bring it into my classroom. But a few years ago, somebody had recommended Death Note, and I checked it out, and it was one that I really, really fell in love with. So that's the one that I use, and we do use it to talk about some of the differences between techniques used in Western comics and Eastern comics.
It's because when you said slice of life, it reminded me, there's this really good manga. It's called My Darling is a Foreigner, and it's by a Japanese creator, and it's about her marriage to an American guy. And it's a lot of like slice of life stuff, like pointing out cultural differences that pop up in the course of their relationship. It was adapted into a movie as well, but the movie obviously has an actual story behind it, whereas the comic is just like these little like slice of life stuff. So that might be something that you might want to check out for like more slice of life stuff and also cultural differences. I found it was really interesting.
Yeah, I'd love
but also
to. Thanks
too,
for recommending it.
yeah, there's also My Hero Academia, which I have not read, but the creator was apparently hugely influenced by Western comics. So
Oh, no
that might be
kidding.
another
All right.
thing to look at like, you know, comparing the superhero form in Western versus Eastern comics.
Will do. No, thanks for the recommends. That's always helpful.
So on that note, what are you interested in lately? Anything catching your eye these days?
Oh gosh, what am I interested in lately? Let's see. Just like the last time that we got together not that long ago, I think my interests have lain more in the realm of like thriller horror comics, a lot of indie stuff. Unfortunately, I just find myself at the age that I'm at right now, finding that reading mainstream superhero stuff, Marvel and DC, that they're cyclical. The stories sort of cycle back around to certain tropes and certain characters, and once you've been around long enough, you start to see the cycles over and over again, and frankly, it becomes a little bit less. So when there's new stuff and exciting things, I will jump on, but for the most part, I'm sticking to some of the indie stuff that's really innovative and pushing the medium forward.
I'm not sure if we mentioned this before, but have you read Department of Truth?
I adore Department of Truth.
Okay.
It is absolutely brilliant. It's probably the best first issue I've read in, I don't know, a decade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's amazing. I still got to catch up on the rest of the series, but I think I've read the first 3 books in it.
Oh yeah, the 5th trade just came out, I don't know, a week or 2 ago, and it is well worth keeping up with. It's just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, I've been watching anytime there's a sale on Amazon, I check to see if they got any when an Image has a sale, I check to see if they have any new Department of Truth stuff. So far, not yet, but hopefully soon they'll have something on there.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. For my part, I have been reading a lot of superhero stuff lately. I just finished a read through of Chip Zdarsky's most recent Daredevil run. But to your point about the cyclical stuff, he was doing this story about, Daredevil and the Hand, and it got very similar to Shadowland from a few years back. So hitting very similar notes in that.
Yeah, and I read that run as well, and I did see some similarities to Shadowland. Now, Shadowland is not a particularly well-received Daredevil run, whereas Zdarsky's was. I think he was able to do more with those concepts than the Shadowland story was. But, I mean, there are still the hallmarks of every every Daredevil story. Like you said, there's the Hand is in there. Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, plays a huge role in becoming mayor. Elektra is in there, although she sort of takes a turn at being Daredevil in there too. So there are a couple of twists on some old tropes, but the old familiar tones are in there as well.
Yeah, so I finished that, and I was just catching up on some other random issues here and there. Now that Captain America is, at the time of recording, it's about to come out, I am trying to dive into the most recent stuff, which was Road to the Cold War storyline. So that was when they brought Sam back, and then, Steve is also still Cap, so it's Captain America Sentinel of Liberty and Captain America Symbol of Truth, I think is the Sam Wilson title.
Yep.
And so I just started. I read the first Steve one. I read the first Sentinel of Liberty one, and I've got Symbol of Truth queued up to read next on my app there.
Yeah, that run was pretty good, and it ended, and then J. Michael Straczynski just took over writing Captain America, and he's a little bit into his run, so there's more waiting on the back end.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Have you read the Straczynski stuff yet?
I think, the first 2 trades are out, and I like it. I do. I like, I've always liked Straczynski. I think that when he's allowed to do his own thing and he's not hampered by editorial interference, he's an excellent writer. So I'm waiting to see kind of how the series develops, because it's still sort of early, but yeah, in general, I like it.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to checking out his stuff. I mean, I generally like his stuff, aside from some of the later end of his Spider-Man, which, like you said, editorial interference. But even like I know a lot of people hated that, Grounded, the Superman story he did, but I thought it was actually kind of interesting.
It was an interesting concept, this idea of Superman sort of walking across America, checking out people on the ground and, less cosmic, big stories, really small things. And there were a couple of really, really good issues and really cool moments. But the same thing happened. DC editorial really kind of had a heavier hand than he would have liked, and he left the series halfway through. And, somebody else had to come in and finish it. And so I don't think it was quite the vision that he had in mind.
Yeah. Anyway, but that's a nice little preamble. And speaking of DC stuff and Superman, today we are talking about Teen Titans Go to the Movies, which is the 2018 animated superhero comedy film, picking up from the cast from the Teen Titans Go animated series. Before we dive too much into this movie, what's kind of your history with the Teen Titans, both in the comics and in this form, the animated series?
I got into Teen Titans in the early 2000s when Jeff Johns took over the book. That was really when I was starting to explore DC in all ways. I gotten in 2000 when they elected Lex Luthor president, because I just thought that was a fascinating development. So I started reading the Superman titles, and then with Hush, I jumped onto Batman titles. And so the Teen Titans series intrigued me. I liked the cast of characters. I liked the look of the art. At that point, I had become a real fan of Jeff Johns, and I just fell madly in love with that series, and I thought it was great. So I started exploring a little bit more of who the Teen Titans are and what their history was. I went back and I checked out some of the Wolfman Perez new Teen Titans stuff from the mid-'80s, which, is a critically acclaimed run that even commercially sort of rivaled the X-Men at the time, which was becoming the biggest thing in comics. And then shortly thereafter, the Teen Titans animated series with the same voice cast and a similar animation style came on. And I thought that was so fresh and so new. And it had this really neat mix of Eastern and Western styles. And then, that show ended, and I thought that was kind of all we were going to get. And then Teen Titans Go hit the scene. And frankly, I was not really into it. I thought, well, it's not a serious take on the Titans, and, it's a comedy show. Not that I didn't want it to exist. I just didn't think it was for me. And then when my kids started watching it, I would be in the room and I would, sit down and I would watch for a few minutes, or we'd be in a hotel and they'd put it on and it would just be episode after episode. I went, you know what? This is really funny. This is legitimately funny. Yeah, they take a lot of liberties with the characters, but I thought it was a really neat way to play with the concept, play with the characters, explore other areas in the DCU, and just have a lot of fun. So when they announced a movie, I thought, well, I'm going to take my kids and we're going to go see it. And I did. And they loved it. And I loved it. And when I rewatched it last week in preparation for tonight, I had my kids watch it with me, and we all got to experience it again, and we had a blast.
Yeah, so my history with Teen Titans was I was a fan of Young Justice. That was my Teen Titans growing when I was getting big into comics, and that was kind of like my gateway into DC in general, because I like Batman, I like Superman, but I hadn't really explored many of the other stuff. And then when I was working at a comic book shop, and Young Justice I had heard good things about, a buddy of mine really liked it, so I decided, all right, let me check it out. And that was when Peter David was writing it, and like instantly I fell in love with Superboy, Tim Drake Robin, Impulse, and all those characters, like the Cassie Sandsmark Wonder Girl, Arrowette, the Secret, all of them. It was such a fun series, and I was actually very disappointed when Johns took over and changed it to Teen Titans, because I felt like it had lost a lot of that kind of like spark that David had to it. I mean, I have gone back since and read those trades, and they're good stuff. It just doesn't really match what I liked when it was Young Justice. And I've only read a little bit of the classic Teen Titans Wolfman Perez run. I've read the first trade, but I have picked them all up. There was a big year-end sale that DC had at the end recently, and I picked up like the entire run for pennies on the dollar. It was ridiculously cheap. It was like it was like $1, $2 a trade. It was ridiculous. So I managed to pick up all of those, and they're in my queue. I'm planning to get to them eventually. And I know a lot of people didn't like it, but I really kind of enjoyed the Titans TV series, the live action one. I thought it had some there were some questionable decisions, but overall, I really kind of like that take on the characters. I loved uh I can never remember it. Brenton Thwait or whatever his name is, the guy who plays Dick Grayson in there. I loved him.
Oh yeah, he's great.
I love their take on Superboy, especially in the last season, how he took like this darker turn. I still maintain that even though he was only in one episode, that was probably the closest thing we've ever gotten to the Clancy Brown Lex Luthor in live action. And it was a really cool show. And then Teen Titans, I remember when this animated series was on the air, being on message boards in the time, and I remember a lot of like Teen Titans comic book fans being very dismissive of it at the time, like the animation style, say it was too anime influenced, it was too goofy. And I didn't have a dog in the fight. My whole thing was just like, well, I think it's good that we have things for kids to get into as well, because there's a lot of people seem to have forgotten that comics were built on the fact they're children's entertainment, and we need to have things for these kids to get into it. And I think it was about like maybe a year ago, I was just searching for stuff on Netflix to put on for my kids, and there was Teen Titans Go. I'm like, all right, let's put this on, see what it is. And I was just sitting there watching with it. And first off, I love the theme song for the Teen Titans Go series. It's just so, infectious. And then when I started watching the stories, I was like, oh my God, this is actually some pretty smart satire they got going on here. It's more than just like, slapstick comedy. It's got that too, but the satire is actually really well done and really intelligent.
I agree completely. If you can make it smart and funny and interesting, I'm on board. But, even to your point, like a few years ago, if we looked at the television landscape, you had 3 different versions of the Teen Titans. You had Teen Titans Go that's, geared obviously towards a younger audience. You had the Titans show, which was definitely for a mature audience. And then you had the Young Justice cartoon, which I think aired its last season not that long ago, a few years ago, that had continued a wonderful tradition of a brilliant show that sort of falls somewhere in the middle. It's much more, I think, tonally what the Jeff Johns Teen Titans run is. So there really was Teen Titans for everybody on television. Forget the comics for a second, but on television, you had Teen Titans for every different audience. And it's a testament to the strength of the characters that they can exist in all of these different forms and still be recognizable as those characters. So I appreciated all 3 for what they individually brought to the landscape, rather than, trying to criticize or gatekeep one over the other. My feeling was let them all exist and let the audiences find whatever it is that speaks to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I see this too, Marvel stuff too. Like they've got, the Spider-Man movies, obviously, which are, much more older audience type thing, and the comics, but also they've got, the new Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man cartoon, which again, it hits kind of like the middle ground, but there's also Spidey and His Amazing Friends, which my son is addicted to. And I think it's awesome, because if not for that cartoon, my son would not be as obsessed with Spider-Man at 2 years old that he is now. And now as he gets older, I can introduce him to the other stuff. So I think it's smart marketing too, like just to have all these different versions of them, because then the audience can grow up with it. Like, I mean, I came in with X-Men 92. It was an animated show that was targeted towards, mostly towards like a younger audience than the comics. And then I was able to graduate into the comics from there.
Same.
So let's talk about this movie. What were some things that kind of jumped out to you when you were rewatching this?
So what jumped out to me was how sort of large in scope in terms of the DC universe it got. You would think if it's Teen Titans Go to the movies, then the Teen Titans would sort of exclusively be featured and maybe a minor cameo here or there. But they really pack this thing with so many references and guest appearances by so many characters across the DCU. Including some ones that no one ever heard of. I mean, my kids were turning to me and going, "Who are the Challengers of the Unknown?" I'm like, I can't begin to explain that to you right now, but essentially they're DC's Fantastic Four, and so that'll have to suffice. And they just thought it was hilarious that they ended up, trapped in an endless void for most of the movie. But you don't have to understand who everyone is to get all the jokes. But I love the fact that it's so broad, it's so colorful. There's just so much going on, and the Teen Titans sit very comfortably at the center of it.
Yeah, I thought it was really funny, and I love just some of the satire of the superhero movie landscape, but also there's some neat little visual gags in the background. Like I noticed right in the start, there's the Lazarus Spa.
Right.
There was also like the Endless Motel or something like that as
Yeah.
well. So they're like all these little kind of visual gags that if you're a fan of DC Comics, you're going to pick up on stuff going on in the background. But also talking about Gene Hackman's real estate scheme.
Right.
And even as far as like getting Nicolas Cage to come back and to play Superman and do the voice.
Absolutely brilliant. Yeah, I mean, the uninitiated might not get it and it won't matter, but if you really know your DC movies in particular, obviously it's a movie, they're capitalizing more on the movies, but there are a couple comic references and TV references as well. It adds a layer of understanding and therefore a layer of humor and a layer of social commentary that for those of us who are really deep in the weeds with the lore, it's just so enjoyable.
Yeah, and one of the things I thought was hilarious was this made me realize that even at 41 years old, I am still not too old for fart jokes yet.
Fart and poop jokes still tickle me to no end. But again, it's a character can't just fart on screen and have it be inherently funny. I mean, I sort of take that back a little bit. I think there is something fun, but a lot of it is the timing and the way that it's done. I mean, so the first major fart joke we get in the movie, the movie opens with the Teen Titans fighting this sort of giant balloon man, in the city, and they end up puncturing him right in the butt, and the air is escaping, and the Teen Titans get a kick out of the fact that he's farting, and the way they sort of play it is like it would be on a childhood schoolyard where they sort of point and laugh like he farted, and the big monster that's threatening all the citizens of the city, suddenly becomes embarrassed, like, it wasn't me, I didn't fart, and there's something really funny about taking what should be this epic battle and reducing it to essentially a fart joke. And that's, I think, why that one in particular plays so well. Plus, it kicks off, for anybody who didn't know the show, it kicks off, this is the kind of humor that you're going to be in for, buckle up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also the fact that you used Balloon Man, I got a kick out of that because, did you watch Gotham?
I watched the first maybe season or two, and then I dropped off. Yeah,
so I tried watching it, and I eventually ended up watching the whole thing like kind of like on background and when it came to Netflix. But when I started watching it when it first was airing, and when they got to, I think it was like the third or fourth episode, it was the Balloon Man episode where this vigilante tying balloons to people, and I'm just like, this is supposed to be a serious show.
Yeah.
And so then when they did this version of Balloon Man, I'm like, yeah, this makes sense for a character named Balloon Man. So this is a much better use of that name.
I agree. And it's an obscure character, and it worked. It didn't need to be anything huge. It just needed to be funny, because that's, it also allowed the Teen Titans to introduce themselves to somebody who didn't know them, and therefore to introduce themselves to the audience who may or may not be familiar with the individual characters and the vibe as a team. And it also gave them an opportunity to introduce the fact that this movie is sometimes a musical. So they sing this whole song where each character gets a verse, and they get to introduce their character traits and their personalities and their powers and all that. And it's catchy and it's fun. And when the whole thing is over, you feel like, okay, now we can begin with the movie proper because we've been introduced to this concept.
Yeah, and it's a great shorthand as an introduction, both to the characters, but also to kind of like, it gives you, it completely sets the tone for what kind of movie this is going to be. It's not going to be something to take seriously. This is not going to be like Young Justice or like the Titans or even, or anything like even remote, or even not even Brave and the Bold, right? It's like below. It's not even that level of semi-seriousness. It's just complete slapsticky. So they're doing this rap song where they're introducing themselves, and meanwhile Balloon Man's still going out there in the background terrorizing the town and stealing people's jewels and stuff. And so much so the Justice League finally has to turn up and stop him.
No. Right, and that's where we get our real introduction to just how big in scope this movie's going to be. I thought it was a brilliant choice. I thought it was really well done. I was thinking on this rewatch that it was so smart of them, because you can't take for granted that anybody going to the movies has watched any of the episodes of the show, particularly parents who are taking their young children to the movies and maybe hadn't really had the interest to sit down and watch the show with the kids. Not that they should or have to, but so for them to go, the filmmakers are catering to them to some extent to say, oh, your kids already know this stuff, so it'll please them because it confirms what they already know. They feel superior because they have this knowledge. But for you, you're going to kind of need this in order to proceed. So it's, again, really, really smart and funny and just wildly entertaining.
And one of the nice things too about that is when you have a show that is mostly geared towards a much younger audience, like, you have the room to tread over well-worn ground, because, like I said, my son, there's only 2 seasons of Spidey and His Amazing Friends. My son has watched all those episodes like maybe 3 or 4 times, and he still doesn't get sick of rewatching the same episodes over and over and over and over and over again. Same thing with my daughter, with many like Teletubbies or any of the stuff that she likes too. She'll watch those episodes on repeat basically, and she doesn't care. And so you're not going to lose any of the existing audience by retreading this ground that they've seen 100 times, because they've probably been watching these episodes 100 times anyway, and they're not at that point in their development where this stuff, they can start to get sick of things.
Absolutely. I mean, I did realize too, this movie actually repeats a couple of the plot lines that had already been established in the show. So for example, the big sort of major thrust of the plot, is Robin wanting his own movie finally, right? And they did that. He was tired of being a sidekick and he wanted to be a headliner. And they had already done an episode where he was tired of being a sidekick and wanted to be a headliner. They had already done an episode where, they re-encounter Slade and, they just sort of defeat him off camera. But, Slade had played a small role in the show. And here they sort of introduce him like they're meeting him for the first time. So, if you'd seen the show, I don't know that necessarily is going to be a barrier to entry or barrier to enjoyment. But they're treading over it again because, as you said, kids don't really care all that much that they've seen it in some other form earlier in the series. They just accept that this is what it is for now, and it's entertaining enough, and we don't care.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Slade thing jumped out at me as well, because I do remember back when the original Teen Titans show was on the air that they had Slade as a villain in that. So then when he pops up here, and it is like the first time they meet them, like with me, I was thinking I'm like, oh wait, didn't this already happen at some point in the past? But like you said, this is like a completely standalone thing. You could watch if you only watch one of the Teen Titans animated things and it's just this movie in isolation, it's fine. It's like a completely standalone thing in its own. And also just like some of you mentioned the Challengers of the Unknown. I got a huge kick out of that. My late co-host was a huge fan of Challengers of the Unknown and like the kind of like pulpy type stuff. I've never read them myself, but I just love the fact that they kept referencing the fact that, but they're unknown. How are they on the list?
Right. It's in the name. Like, nobody should know who they are.
And talk about a deep cut.
Yeah,
so much. And I love it. They even bring them back in the post credit scene where they're still floating around the credits. They're like, I think we've missed the motion picture.
Yeah. Yeah, we get this introduction to them, and then they're quickly dispatched. When the Teen Titans end up in that void, we get like, oh no, I'm sorry, it was the other superheroes, the other Justice League, and what they end up in there, and we get to see the Challengers again, who think they're saved, and then when everybody else leaves and they're still stuck in there, it's another sort of tragic yet hilarious moment. And then, as you said, they come back at the end, so it's a joke that's sort of seeded throughout, so it feels like it has this payoff, right? They don't just disappear, which I guess would be funny enough in and of itself, but the fact that we get to see them 2 more times and they're just sort of dealt with so ignominiously is, I thought, really, really funny.
You can also look at that kind of a commentary on how these superhero properties are treated, because so many times, right? The Challenger of the Unknown, they've had, a lot of different relaunches. And then after each one, fails to find an audience, they just go back into the void for a few years until someone will come along and try again.
Yeah, right. That idea of characters sort of languishing in obscurity because nobody wants to write them, nobody wants to draw them, no audience is particularly interested in them at a particular moment. But there's also a fickleness to the industry. And I don't just mean comics, but comics and their adaptations, in that, as soon as a creator comes along who has an interesting take on a really obscure property, suddenly it skyrockets and becomes like the biggest thing going on, and everybody's all about it, and everybody wants to claim that, they were a fan when it wasn't cool and all that. And, I guess there's some truth for some people about that, but, yeah, of course, there's a push and pull to the whole industry. I could see within our lifetimes, Challengers of the Unknown coming back and being a huge hit if somebody finds the right take on it. But to your point, that hasn't really happened in quite a while. So yeah, there they are, floating in a void.
Yeah,
figuratively and literally.
Absolutely could happen. I mean, like Blade was an obscure, Marvel character before Wesley Snipes came along, and and it's funny, everybody now, they talk about how, like, oh, that movie, it's the reason we have, a superhero craze. It got the public interested in superhero movies. I'm like, well, no, because it wasn't marketed as a superhero movie. It was marketed as a martial arts vampire movie.
Yeah, it was straight up horror. I mean, it's R-rated horror.
Also, I love some of the voice acting they got in it. They got a pretty good cast for this. I mean, you had Will Arnett as Slade, which also I was surprised to see that he also produced this as well.
Yeah, he did.
And you had Patton Oswalt come in as the Atom. Stan Lee appearing in a DC movie for the first and only time, unfortunately now.
Yep.
We had mentioned, Nicolas Cage as Superman, but also you get who is it? Jimmy Kimmel as Batman.
Yeah, that's a choice.
Will Wheaton as the Flash. But yeah, I love just like all the little references, like they're talking about their movies, and Wonder Woman's like, oh yeah, it took a while, but I finally got one too. And then Green Lantern, he says, oh, there was a Green Lantern movie, but we don't really talk about that one.
We don't talk about that one. Yeah. I like that they can poke fun at themselves while they're poking fun at other things too. I think that if you have a sense of humor about everything outside yourself, but you're unwilling to laugh at yourself, that's not a good look. Yeah. And the fact that, here we are 15 years later and they can look back and say, yeah, that was not our finest moment. But they've had plenty of successes, so they can afford to laugh at it. I thought that joke was great. And even my kids who haven't seen the Green Lantern movie, they know full well the reputation that movie has. So, they got the joke. They got it.
Yeah. I see a bunch of critics called it Deadpool for kids. And I think, that's a good way of describing it. And one of the interesting things about the Deadpool movies is they're one part serious superhero movie, but they're also one part superhero parody movie. And this is just like, this leans full on into the parody side of things. Yes.
Right. It never really becomes a full on superhero movie. It very much is in comedy. I think that's a pretty smart way of looking. I didn't really think about it in terms of Deadpool, but in terms of like all the fourth wall breaking, the referential, the meta commentary, that kind of stuff. And there's even references to Deadpool right in it because, that when the Teen Titans meet Slade, they ask him if he's Deadpool, which is funny on a number of levels. First of all, we know that Slade's sort of code name in the comics is Deathstroke the Terminator, right? Mm-hmm. Which for, I'm sure, reasons having to do with the intended audience, they can't have a character called Deathstroke, when it's a kid's movie. So they call him Slade, which is fine. But they do reference him as Slade Wilson. And for those of us who know the history, we know Deadpool was created as a parody of Deathstroke. That's why he's called Deadpool, and his name is Wade Wilson instead of Slade Wilson. He was always intended to be a Deathstroke sort of knockoff until he took on a real personality and life of his own. So for them to mistake him for Deadpool serves two purposes. One of acknowledging that history of the creation of Deadpool and the relationship between Deadpool and Deathstroke, but also, as you said, to acknowledge that, yeah, the tone of this movie is kind of like Deadpool for kids.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't even picked up on that, but yeah, you're absolutely right. The fact that they have this, the fact they use Slade in there is, but also the fact they have, Jade Wilson. So they're still playing with the rhyming scheme of the name. So we have Jade
Right.
Wilson played by Kristen Bell.
Yeah, she's great.
And then we have, Deadpool, obviously Wade Wilson.
Yep.
And yeah, Rob Liefeld's post Deadpool popularity clip. Oh, he was never intended to be like Deathstroke. I'm like, come on.
I mean, all you have to do is just look at the names.
Yeah.
Forget about the look, forget about the weapons. I mean, all of that's very, very similar. But, the names, Deathstroke, Deadpool, Slade Wilson, Wade Wilson, it's pretty clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also the fact that we've got this Doomsday device, which is an acronym for the new streaming service.
Right.
I just like it just like all of it was hilarious, and the fact that we've got, and this is also too like some smart social commentary, the fact that these streaming services are turning us into mindless zombies.
Absolutely right. Even the main superheroes succumb to the power of it. They become these wide-eyed zombies who will obey Slade's every command and fight the Teen Titans and all that. But yeah, absolutely. Again, look, DC, while they don't have sort of their own streaming service, the fact that they're owned by Warner Brothers, which also owns HBO, so Max, being the streaming service that HBO owns, has all of the DC content on it, except this movie, oddly enough. I had to rent it on Amazon Prime. It's not on Max for an odd reason. I don't know why. But yeah, I mean,
I could whip up some conspiracy theories about why I think that is.
Oh, I'm sure. But I mean, indirectly they are contributing to this. So once again, they're poking fun at themselves and being able to laugh because they have our money already.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to take a quick break and then we'll come right back. Ever have a situation where you want to watch something on Netflix, but it's only available in a different country? Or are there websites you want to access, but they're blocked in your location? What you need is a VPN, or a virtual private network. A VPN is effectively your own superhero mask to protect your device's secret identity from the internet. Your IP address and all your data are encrypted, allowing you to browse the internet safely and securely. In these uncertain times, protecting what you do on the internet is more important than ever. But free VPNs available out there are not as secure as they claim, so you need a trusted service like ExpressVPN. I've been a loyal user of ExpressVPN for years. They offer the easiest experience, the fastest speeds, and the most responsive customer service I've ever dealt with. But the best part of ExpressVPN is that you can choose the country you're accessing the internet from, which lets you get around geo-blocking. So if you want to watch something that's only available on Netflix UK, you set your location in the UK and then you watch as much as you like. If you'd like to try out ExpressVPN, you can get 60 days of free usage by signing up using my referral link in the podcast description. Just click the link in the description to get started. Since you're listening to this show, I already know you love watching superhero movies and TV shows, and you just might enjoy superhero comics. But how about superhero novels? I'm giving away 2 free superhero novels and 1 free superhero short story. Visit percivalconstantine.com/SCP to get access to Vanguard, Heroes Forged, the first novel in my own Avengers and X-Men inspired superhero novel series, and Ronin Born, my cyberpunk superhero novel set in a futuristic Japan. I'm also throwing in Fire and Lightning, a free prequel story to my new Power Rangers inspired superhero series Omega Knights. So visit percivalconstantine.com/SCP. Those are just the letters SCP to get started, or click on the link in the show notes. And now on with the show. To your point about, using obscure things like the challenge with on the unknown, like there's even a way they're poking fun at that aspect, because we have these trailers before the Batman movie, which Batman again.
Right.
Again, poking fun at the fact that we just keep DC and Warner Brothers, they just keep going back to the Batman well every few years. To the expense of so many other characters. And the fact that we get, an Alfred movie.
Right.
Which is, it's funny on two levels. First off, the absurdity of doing an Alfred movie before you're going to do a Robin movie, but also the fact that they did an Alfred TV show and it ran for like, what, 2 seasons?
They sure did. They sure did. Yeah, I mean, they run through a number of different trailers, which just serves to rile up Robin because each one he expects is going to be his own, which is a silly concept when you think about it, because if they were going to make a movie about him, you'd think he would have known in advance and wouldn't be sitting in the theater waiting for his trailer to come on to inform him they're making a movie about him. But I'll let that one go because this isn't that kind of movie. But yeah, they introduced an Alfred movie, a Batmobile movie that's just about the car, and then Utility Belt, the movie, which is just about the belt, and there's no human characters in it.
But the fact is, too, they also did a Batmobile TV show. That's the thing.
Yeah,
it was called Bat Wheels.
Yeah, it's so silly, it's so ridiculous. But you're right; it does point to the fact that we will wring every ounce of IP potential from the Batman franchise. We will reboot it and reboot it and reboot it and recast it and rewrite it and retone it. And I don't know, there seems to be an audience for it, but at some point they're going to get tired.
Oh, wait, but here's the funny thing. So I was just checking the dates. This movie came out in 2018. Pennyworth premiered in 2019. Bat Wheels came out in 2022. So this movie predicted both those things.
They're so prescient. So prescient. Fabulous.
And then, yeah, they even get up to the freaking, like you said, Utility Belt, the movie, which so far has not happened yet, but give it time. I'm sure we'll get around to that at some point.
They predicted the other two, so I'll wait till they announce Utility Belt, the movie. Coming soon to a theater near you.
Yeah. But also the different, the people in the audience, like you've got, was it Aquaman feeding the Swedish fish to Hawkman, who's just perched on the chair.
Yeah. One of the things that I love about including all those characters is they're able to take them to their extremes. So Aquaman, they depict consistently basically as a fish. Like he's a man, but he's a fish, right? When he's out of the water, he starts flopping around on the ground like he can't breathe, when he's still a man. Like he's and Hawkman, they make a full on a bird, like he's just a bird. The Atom, never, I don't think he ever appears regular size. He only appears shrunken down. And he gets stepped on, and he gets, smeared on a car's windshield and windshield wipered off. Like it's all these, bug themed kind of jokes, even though he's not a bug. Like he's not Ant-Man. He's the Atom, but they still kind of treat him like he's Ant-Man. And they can do that. The Swamp Thing sprouts flowers from his hair like a Bob Ross afro. They just are able to take these characters who are admittedly sort of ridiculous in and of themselves and just lean into the ridiculousness.
Yeah. And the fact that they're going back in time to try to stop all the superheroes from being created so that then they can be the only superheroes and they can get their own movie. Just like fun things, like when they get Aquaman stuck like in the freaking in the plastic rings.
Yeah, like that's like a soda can plastic ring thing.
But I love when they try to save the Waynes and they're just like, "Don't go down there. That's crime alley. Are you crazy?"
Yeah, but then they send them down the other alley because we didn't realize that next door was like this happy fun carnival alley. They go there instead. Oh, it's wonderful and it's clever, and it allows us to relive, those archetypal origins that we all know and love, and see them in a slightly different way. So, the Waynes dying, which we don't see on camera, is played for laughs, which is not ever how we see it. In fact, I think when they go back to undo what they've done because they realize that the world is just like a fiery wasteland because none of the heroes are there to stop the villains, they send the Waynes down crime alley, and one of them gives Martha
they give her the
pearl necklace to wear, which is wonderful.
Oh man, yeah, it was great.
But I love that sequence despite the fact that if you were to take it out of the movie, it would change nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It does not advance the plot at all. It is a true digression, a true diversion from the plot, and I'm all about it. It's what, a 5-minute sequence,
Yeah,
a montage play to music, and it's really funny. And they do these things, and then they put it all back, and they return to the plot exactly where they left it. And I don't care. I just think it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But even too, like they hit like little Hollywood jokes that people won't get, but like Shia LaBeouf playing Slade in the movie.
I don't think
and then they just keep on
you're
beating
not
him up.
pronouncing it correcly.
Oh, Shia LaBeouf.
Shia LaBeouf's, which is the best part.
And then they just keep on, as soon as he says that, they keep beating him on him harder.
Right. Wait. It's Shia LaBeouf. Oh, it's Shia LaBeouf. And they just keep pummeling him. Oh, fabulous. Fabulous.
And also, like, Starfire's affection for cats, so the Balloon Man cats, and then she just goes and hugs them all. They just pop each time.
Yes. Wonderful. Yeah, you're right. Once they get into the whole sort of making of movies and that whole plot, they are able to do a lot of commenting on, what it's like to be on a movie set and how movies are made and how movies are received and all that. And it is some smart commentary, because you'd hope your audience at least understands a little bit about that.
Yeah, our mutual friend Anthony probably would not have gotten a kick out of the Batman v Superman reference where they hug with Martha and then they start fighting when they find out their fathers have different names.
Right. I think Anthony has a good sense of humor.
He's got a good sense of humor.
It.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even down to using the Batman 89 font for the coming soon ones. It's just like it's hard to find other things to talk about this movie, because it's just like a lot of the story is very light, like we've talked about. It's just mostly a way to like kind of poke fun at the superhero movie landscape, and again, in some ways they've predicted stuff that ended up happening, which just tickles me to no end. That's
wild. Yeah, I didn't even know about what'd you call it, Bat Wheels?
Yeah, it was a HBO Max animated series.
Was not even a blip on my radar. I'll have to check that out.
Anyway, any other things you wanted to mention about this?
So the actual sort of scheme involved, the villain scheme, right? Slade disguises himself as Jade Wilson, which again is a bizarre disguise, considering he's like this slight female, voiced by Kristen Bell, but you take the mask off and it's Slade underneath. Again, it's not that kind of movie. I'm not gonna criticize it, but that she lures the Teen Titans into the studio. She's recreated the Titans Tower aesthetic, down to every detail, so much so that they don't realize that the bathroom is just a prop, and they poop in the prop toilet like one after another. I'll take a good poop joke, and you want to repeat it and just bang it into the ground. I'm here for it. But then is able to separate Robin from the Titans by, giving him what he wants and making it so that he'll abandon his friends in order to get that. Knocks him out, and then he wakes up in what he thinks is still the movie set, and she's brought him back to the actual Titans Tower, where he, it infiltrates his own sort of safe where this device is, so that she can access it, or he can access it, I guess. There's something really fun about that too, because not only does it show him the error of his ways and that he should never have abandoned his friends, like there is a kind of message in there.
There is a message,
a little bit. It's buried, and it's they certainly don't go all in on it, but there's a friendship message in there. But the key to his escape is a joke that had run through the series, which is the fact that he has these tiny baby hands, and he's able to escape from the manacles by just pulling his hands out of his gloves, and then he's ready for the fight. So, they really do service the fans in some really nice ways. They manage to give us some new things that even the dedicated fans of the show might not be that familiar with. They include, some of the humor and things for the parents who might be taking the kids. you're right. It's hard to find anything to really dig that deep into because really it's fun. It's just a
Yeah.
really fun movie. It's funny, it's entertaining, it's musical, it's colorful. It's all the things that you'd want from an animated movie for kids.
Yeah, yeah. And well too, I just like that I love too the green screen where they've got Robin in this complete outfit and then it's just exactly what he's wearing anytime anyway. Again, a nod to like the Marvel movies especially do this a lot where they put like Tom Holland in full motion capture when it's just you're just wearing the Spider-Man suit. I don't think you have to do all that for that.
You do not.
But yeah, it is just a fun film to just sit down and enjoy. And yeah, there is kind of this there is this message in there about, trusting in your friends and believing in yourself and, not worrying too much about what other people think of you.
Yeah.
But then also at the end where, Starfire says, "Oh, it's not the kind of movie where you're supposed to ask your parents questions." He says, "Oh yeah, okay. Well, kids, go ask your parents where babies come from instead."
Right. And the credits roll immediately afterwards. I do remember getting got by that in the movie theater because I was with my
I was about
kids
to ask you that.
Yeah, they were young. To be honest, I can't remember whether they actually did ask me. They didn't this time. My guess is, I know 3 of the 4 of them know. The little guy, he just didn't say anything. But yeah, again, really funny until you realize that some parents probably did have a really awkward car ride home from the theater that night.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, short episode today and not a whole lot to talk about with this film. But like I said, it's a fun movie. And if we just kept on going, I think we'd just be like pointing out, self-referential stuff in the movie the entire time. But anyway, Scott, anything else you wanted to say about this or anywhere you'd like to point people?
I would say for anybody who's a DC fan who maybe saw a little of the aesthetic of Teen Titans Go, or maybe a little of the aesthetic of this movie, and dismissed it because, it wasn't a serious take, or maybe they were a fan of the previous Teen Titans series that definitely took the material a little bit more seriously. I say give it a try and keep your mind open to other interpretations of the characters that you love, because to close ourselves off because that's not my Teen Titans seems like you're depriving yourself needlessly of what is potentially a really fun opportunity. And I would say the same about, the adult themed Titans show. Like, give that a try. And, you might, if you let go a little bit and say, okay, it's not my Titans, but is there something of value here? And I would say in both cases, even though they're extremes on opposite ends of the spectrum, I think the answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is, and even if you're not a fan of the more slapsticky take on this, I think you can still find a lot of things to like about this. Like we said, with all the self-referential humor, and one of the things too I'd say is comic fans got to learn to laugh at themselves sometimes, because some of this stuff is inherently ridiculous when we think about it, and so it's okay to acknowledge that every now and then.
Absolutely. Listen, we have bigger problems in this world to worry about than, our favorite IPs not being serviced properly. We can let that stuff go and look, if something's not for you, it's not for you, and that's okay. I'm still happy it all exists. I'm happy that a mainstream audience for the last 20 to 25 years has been discovering what you and I and a handful of other people have known all along, that these are great characters, great concepts created by genius creators and put out there in the world for our pleasure and entertainment. And I'm going to get every ounce of pleasure out of them that I can. And I'm not going to worry about the stuff that, isn't for me or that I don't like. I'm just going to enjoy what I enjoy and not tell anybody else that they can't or shouldn't.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Scott, anything you'd like to promote? Anywhere you'd like to direct people before we finish up today?
I am nowhere. I am not really on social media. As a teacher, I don't really produce my own content, but I am always thrilled when you extend the invitation for me to come on here and be a part of this. It's such a joy, and I love catching up with you and talking about the stuff that we love.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, check out Scott's other appearances on this show if you haven't yet. We talked about Big Hero 6 and WandaVision. And if you're interested in his Superman takes, also check out his appearances on Digging for Kryptonite as well. Some great appearances on there too.
Yep, absolutely.
As for us, we are superherocinephiles.com and Super Cinema Pod, mostly on Blue Sky, but we also post release announcements on Threads and Instagram, so you can follow us on both of those too. And also Superhero Cinephiles on Facebook if you want to follow us there. And that does it for this episode. Thanks so much for watching, or thanks so much for listening, I should say, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks for listening to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. Superhero Cinephiles is produced by me, Percival Constantine. The show is created by myself and the late, great Derek Ferguson, our host emeritus. Visit us on the web at superherocinephiles.com to listen to past episodes or find out how you can be a guest yourself. Support the show by visiting our advertiser links or click the Buy Me a Coffee link on the website to make a one-time donation. We are Super Cinema Pod on both Instagram and Blue Sky, so please be sure to follow us. We'd also appreciate if you could rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts and share us with your friends.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.